So I've been staring at this project all week, and uh, honestly, it's kind of messing with how I look at everything.
It gets in your head, doesn't it?
It totally does. We talk about digital art all the time, right? But usually we're talking about the surface.
Yeah, how high is the resolution? How realistic is the rendering?
Exactly. We're obsessed with making the digital look physical.
Mm.
You know, we want the metaverse to look like the real world.
We want the simulation to be indistinguishable from reality.
Right. But then you have this project after Vincent van Gogh by Kenji Kojima, which dropped earlier this year.
Mm.
And he completely flips the table.
Mm.
He takes maybe the most physical, tactile artist in history. Van Gogh, I mean, the guy whose paint is so thick it casts the shadow, and he just obliterates him with binary code.
It's a fascinating inversion.
It's not about making digital look physical. It's about dissolving the physical into pure data.
And choosing Van Gogh isn't an accident.
Yeah.
You're so right. When you think of matter in art history, you think of Van Gogh's impasto. You think of that struggle with the physical medium, and Kojima is taking that matter and forcing it through the grinder of 21st century data.
And we're not just talking about some Photoshop filter here. I went through the project documentation, the video works he released under Creative Commons, and the process is surprisingly aggressive.
Aggressive is a good word.
It feels less like art creation and more like an autopsy of an image.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. An autopsy reveals the structure underneath.
Right.
And that is precisely the mission of this deep dive. We're going to explore how Kojima deconstructs our visual reality, shifting us from the era of pigment to the era of the algorithm.
Okay, so to get there, we have to deal with this title, After Vincent van Gogh.
Yes.
Because after usually sounds like a tribute or, a sequel. But in art history, it's a technical term, d'après.
It is. It technically means a study or a copy, but I've always found the word copy a little reductive here.
Yeah, me too. When a master does an after painting, they aren't just tracing lines.
No, not at all.
And the sources point out that Van Gogh himself was obsessed with this practice. He wasn't just some wild genius painting from his gut. He was a student of the grammar of painting.
He absolutely was. He did after works of Japanese ukiyo-e prince HIROSHIGE specifically, and Western masters like Delacroix.
Think about the Plum Garden at Kameido by HIROSHIGE. Van Gogh copied that. He copied Delacroix's The Good Samaritan.
Right, but the key insight from Kojima's notes is that Van Gogh was trying to internalize the logic of those artists. He was trying to figure out how HIROSHIGE flattened space or how Delacroix used complementary colors.
He was hacking their source code.
I love that. Yes, he was hacking their source code.
So Van Gogh was reverse engineering the masters. And now Kojima is reverse engineering Van Gogh.
But instead of using a brush to understand the grammar of painting,
Kojima is using code to understand the grammar of the digital image.
Exactly. Which brings us to the fundamental difference in their tools. Van Gogh's grammar was perspective and color theory. Kojima's grammar is binary.
Zeros and ones.
The logical structure that, underpins every single pixel on your screen right now.
So let's talk about the specific works Kojima tackles in this 2026 project. He's looking at that same lineage. He analyzes HIROSHIGE's evening shower at Atake. He looks at Delacroix, and then at Van Gogh's versions of them.
And then he goes for the heavy hitters.
Oh, yeah. Starry Night in Wheatfield with crows.
Paintings that are just so culturally saturated. We've seen them on coffee mugs, tote bags.
Mouse pads.
We stop really seeing them because they're so familiar. And Kojima's goal is to just break that familiarity.
And he does it by treating the painting as a data set.
Yeah.
This is where the tech gets really interesting and, honestly, a little disturbing. He's not using AI in the way we usually think of it.
Right. This isn't Midjourney or Deli.
No, it's not scraping millions of images to assemble a new one.
That's a critical distinction. Generative AI is an act of assemblage. It's collage on a massive scale. It's additive.
And Kojima's doing the opposite.
He's practicing deconstruction. He isn't adding a single pixel that wasn't there before.
He calls the technique bitwise operations. Now, for anyone who hasn't coded, this might sound like jargon, but it's actually pretty elemental.
Very elemental. He's operating at the level of individual bits, the zeros and ones that define the color of a single pixel.
And if you look at the documentation, for Starry Night, he identifies exactly 103,894 pixel colors. That's the data set.
And he doesn't change the colors?
It changes their address. He changes where they live on the screen.
The visual effect of this is Well, have you watched the video for Wheatfield with crows?
I have. It's so unsettling.
It is.
It's not just static. I mean, static implies random noise. This feels like the image is fighting itself.
Yeah.
You see fragments of the crows, shards of the wheat field, but they're being torn apart and scattered across the screen.
That's because he's using logical operators to scramble the data. He's essentially applying a mathematical formula that displaces the pixels based on their binary values. It's a rigorous mathematical chaos.
And the timeline matters here. In a normal JPEG or PNG, the computer renders the image instantly. Boom, Starry Night.
But Kojima slows it down. He forces you to watch the passage of time as the algorithm tries to resolve the image.
It creates this incredible tension. You're waiting for the image to snap into place, for the glitch to resolve into the masterpiece you know.
But because pixels are just 4 binary values, red, green, blue, and alpha, when you start swapping bits, the whole thing just dissolves into this digital soup.
It reminds me of those old defragmentation drives from the 90s.
Totally.
But instead of organizing files, it's pulverizing a masterpiece. And the documentation says he intentionally programs it so the image struggles to align. It's a state of suspension.
It forces you to confront the fragility of the digital image. We think of digital files as permanent, perfect copies.
Right.
But Kojima is showing us that Starry Night on a screen is just a fragile alignment of, what, 103,894 specks of light?
And if you shift a 0 to a 1, the whole illusion collapses. It's that Matrix code moment.
Yeah.
He's stripping away the lady in the red dress and showing us the cascading code underneath.
But he takes it a step further.
He does. He doesn't just want you to see the data. He wants you to hear it.
And this is an area Kojima has been exploring for a long time, since his RGB Music Lab software back in 2007.
Right.
He's fascinated by the idea that digital information is fungible. Data is just data. You can render it as light, or you can render it as sound.
So he takes the RGB values, which for our listeners are just numbers from 0 to 255, representing red, green, and blue intensity.
And he maps them to a musical scale, a 12-tone scale, specifically.
And because the pixels are being scattered by these bitwise operations, the melody gets scattered too.
I don't know if I'd call it a melody.
No, melody is definitely the wrong word. It's more like structured chaos.
Yeah.
It's played on a MIDI piano, so it has this very rigid mechanical sound.
No.
As you watch Starry Night dissolve, you're hearing the sound of the color blue being ripped apart mathematically.
It's synesthesia, but mediated by a processor. But what strikes me is that it's not random noise. If the algorithm put the pixels back in the right order, you would hear the harmony of the original composition. What you're hearing is the dissonance of the data being scrambled.
It's interesting you mentioned that mechanical feel, because when I looked into Kenji Kojima's background, I expected a total tech head.
Right, someone who grew up hacking Linux kernels or something.
Yeah. But his history is wildly analog.
It is the kind of biography that makes you stop and reread. He was born in Japan, came to New York in 1980, and spent the first decade of his career doing something that is arguably the opposite of digital art.
Egg tempera painting.
Egg tempera.
I mean, you can't get more matter than that.
Yeah.
You're cracking eggs, separating the yolk, mixing it with powdered pigments. It's medieval.
It's messy, it smells.
And it's heavy, physically heavy.
Yeah.
He was painting on panels, using these ancient techniques, and he was successful.
Very successful. He was in the corporate collections, Citibank, Hess Oil. He was playing the art market game perfectly.
So why the pivot? The sources quote him talking about a feeling of being stuck. But it wasn't a creative block. It sounds like a moral or existential guilt.
It was ecological and spiritual. He looked at his studio and just saw waste. Pigments are chemicals, canvas is material.
Framing, shipping, storage.
It all takes a toll on the physical world. He describes feeling stuck in the materiality of civilization.
That phrase really stuck with me, materiality of civilization.
Yeah.
We usually think of art as this lofty spiritual thing, but Kojima saw it as just more stuff.
More junk cluttering up the planet.
So the move to computers in the 90s wasn't about chasing the new. It was a pursuit of lightness.
Yes. He explicitly says that working with computers felt clean. It didn't waste materials. It was a liberation from the physical weight of art history.
That context changes everything about after Vincent van Gogh.
Yeah.
He's not just glitching a painting because it looks cool.
No, there's a deep philosophy there.
He's taking these heavy material objects, these oil paintings that require climate-controlled vaults, and vaporizing them into weightless code. It's almost an act of purification for him.
Or an act of sublimation, turning solid into gas. And this mindset became even more relevant post-COVID. The sources mentioned that when he couldn't go out to shoot video, which had been his main medium for a while,
He turned to the Internet archives. He went dumpster diving in the public domain.
essentially. But because of his background, he didn't see these archival images as just pictures. He saw them as clean resources. He could manipulate them, destroy them, and rebuild them without wasting a single drop of paint.
This brings us to the philosophical core of the project. And this is where I think Kojima is really ahead of the curve. It's his theory about perception.
A filter theory.
Yeah, this idea that our eyes aren't just cameras, they're algorithmic filters.
This connects directly to his interest in encryption. Kojima argues that the raw world, the reality outside our heads, is absolute chaos.
A total bombardment. A bombardment of photons, sound waves, radiation. If we perceived it all, we'd be overwhelmed instantly.
So our biology essentially runs a compression algorithm. We filter out the noise and construct a user interface that we call reality.
Exactly. We are decoding the world in real time. Kojima uses the metaphor of the one-time pad cipher.
Yeah.
This goes back to his Split Merge series from 2013.
Right.
He looks at something like Seurat's pointillism.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a Sunday afternoon on the island of La Grande Jatte, the one made of millions of tiny dots.
Yeah, of course.
When you stand close, it's just colored noise, it's encrypted data. But when you step back, your brain decrypts the code and you see people in a park.
So Kojima believes that all vision works this way.
He does.
So when he scrambles Starry Night with these bitwise operations, he's not destroying the image, he's re-encrypting it.
Or perhaps he's showing us the raw data before our brain has a chance to smooth it out. He's disabling the filter.
Wow.
When you watch those pixels fight for alignment, you're seeing the chaos that exists before perception kicks in. That is a trippy thought. It implies that the glitch isn't the error. The clear image is the lie, or at least the construction.
The glitch is the raw truth.
And that perspective informs how he handles the ownership of this art. If reality is just data that should be accessible to everyone, then art shouldn't be locked away.
That brings us to the Creative Commons part. In a world where everyone is trying to sell NFTs and create artificial scarcity for digital files,
Kojima basically says, here, take the source code, take the video, it's yours.
he prioritizes reproducibility over ownership. It goes right back to that guilt about the material value of art. If he makes a unique object, it has weight, it has a price, it's heavy.
But if he makes a digital file that can be copied 1 billion times for free, it's weightless. It becomes like air.
The website literally says, even if you don't approve, you can keep it.
It's such a refreshing attitude, it's anti-market.
It's the philosophy of a shared signal. He wants this grammar of binary to be understood by everyone. He's treating his art like open source software. He's contributing to the code base of culture, not trying to sell a product.
So if we zoom out, we started with Van Gogh trying to decode the grammar of the masters using paint. Now we have Kojima decoding the grammar of the digital age using binary.
We've moved from the heavy, sticky world of matter to the clean, chaotic world of data.
And the crucial takeaway here is that we are living in that transition. We are creatures of matter living in a world increasingly defined by data.
And Kojima's art is the friction point between those two realities.
It makes you look at your screen differently. I'm looking at the waveform of our recording right now, and I'm realizing it's just a representation. If I tweaked a few bits, our voices would turn into static.
And that fragility is what Kojima wants us to embrace. He's asking us to look at the structure, not just the surface, to see the code in the Wheatfield.
I want to leave our listeners with a thought that really hit me while I was watching the Starry Night data dissolve. If Kojima is right, and our eyes are just highly efficient algorithms designed to filter out chaos and show us a coherent world.
It makes you wonder about the efficiency of that algorithm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What are we missing? If our biological software is so good at smoothing over the cracks, at hiding the noise, what glitches in actual reality are right in front of our faces that we literally cannot see?
That is the haunting question. Maybe the ghosts, the anomalies, the things we can't explain, maybe they aren't supernatural.
Maybe they're just data packets our brain decided to filter out to keep us sane.
And maybe art like Kojima's is the only way to catch a glimpse of them.
Go download the videos, watch the pixels fight, and let us know what you see in the static. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Always a pleasure.
Catch you in the next stream.